Just a few days ago, one of the highest profile debates on evolution in years occurred on Tucker Carlson's podcast, of all places. It's already garnered millions of hits across multiple social media platforms. And as someone who has done many such debates against young earth creationists about evolution on this channel before, I felt that I needed to weigh in on this, especially since I have not seen much discussion of this debate despite how many views it's been getting and how just terrible of a job Bret Weinstein does defending evolution here. Seriously, the man is a former evolutionary biology professor, and I don't think I have ever, and meaning ever, seen anyone defend evolution or attack creationism as poorly as he does here with Tucker Carlson. I mean, it is an absolute train wreck in every sense of the word.
I've been wanting to talk to you for the last year. I went on Joe Rogan's show about a year ago, and I stated that I don't believe in Darwinism.
And of course, Tucker is already starting this whole thing off with a massive lie. No, he did not just go on Joe Rogan and state that he didn't believe in Darwinism. He stated a lot more than that.
There's no evidence that in fact, I think we've kind of given up on the idea of evolution. The theory of evolution as articulated by Darwin is like kind of not true. Right?
In what sense?
Well, in the most basic sense, the idea that, all life emerged from a single cell organism and over time, and there would be a fossil record of that, and there's not.
There is.
No, there's no evidence at all zero, that, people, evolve seamlessly from a single cell amoeba. No, there's not. There's no chain in the fossil record of that at all.
So yeah, clearly Tucker did not simply go on Joe Rogan just to state his disbelief in Darwinism. He went much, much further beyond the pale than that and claimed that there was zero evidence supporting Darwinian evolution and saying that scientists today don't even accept evolution in terms of universal common ancestry, which is just a complete bold-faced lie. There are not just videos about this, but publication after publication after publication clearly tracing the chain of evolution that Tucker says does not exist, with literally thousands of examples of transitional fossils. But there's evidence from other fields too that Tucker just conveniently leaves out, like genetics being the major one, but also biogeography, evo-devo. There's evidence from so many fields of science that it's just completely overwhelming. And for Tucker to characterize it in any other way, especially the way he did there, where he said there's zero evidence and nobody today even accepts evolution and says it's just a theory, it's nothing more than a complete dishonest lie. And then he's just going to lie about that lie now that he's sitting in front of an actual evolutionary biologist and say, well, all I did was express my disbelief in Darwinism.
And I stated that I don't believe in Darwinism. And basically, I think God created people. I don't think it was it's just a matter of belief. And you texted me and said, I'm an actual evolutionary biologist. We need to have this conversation.
But we all already knew that Tucker Carlson is a massive liar. So I was excited for an evolutionary biologist to finally be in the same room as Tucker, talking about evolution, where he can correct him about the state of the evidence and where the facts actually lie, and correct Tucker's misunderstanding publicly. Right? That's what you're gonna do, Bret. Right?
I did want to have this conversation with you, and let's just say, because evolution is my professional realm,
Yes.
I'm sure I could cite you chapter and verse.
Well, you definitely could.
But it's pointless. First of all, that doesn't make me right. The fact is, yes, I know a lot of factual material, but there are some deeper issues here. And I thought it would be useful if you and I just explored them, because I think you're standing in for a lot of people who have begun to have very profound questions about the story that they've been told about evolution and what its relationship is to biology and, most importantly, to people.
Yes.
Having the facts doesn't make you right. Then what does, Bret? If having the facts on your side isn't what makes you right, then what? I don't even know what would make you right. I mean, oh, maybe Tucker only had Bret on this show, knowing that this would not be a let's confront Tucker Carlson with the facts kind of episode. Maybe no evolutionary biologists are allowed onto Tucker Carlson's podcast if they want to come with the actual facts. And that's why he's having somebody like Bret Weinstein on. I literally just can't even think of any other reason why he would go down this route. He's saying that Tucker is a stand-in for the people that have questions about how evolution relates to them. This has nothing to do with whether or not evolution is true. Tucker went on Joe Rogan's podcast to clearly say there is zero evidence for evolution and the scientists don't even accept it as a valid theory anymore. That's what he said on Joe Rogan. And now, Bret Weinstein, you're going to come on here and say, well, I could show you all the evidence, but that's not going to make me right. Yes, it will, Bret. That is exactly what you should do if you want to be right. It literally seems like Bret just wants to go out here and try to find some sort of middle ground where we can come to some agreement on things, even though Tucker clearly either doesn't know the state of the evidence or is actively lying about the state of the evidence. He's not just a stand-in for ignorant people. He's one of the largest mouthpieces in the country pushing out disinformation to these people. He's a propagandist. I just cannot, for the life of me, understand what the strategy even is. I've never seen a debate on evolution where right at the very front, the person who's supposed to be explaining why evolution is true to the creationist comes out and says, well, I could go through all the facts and evidence, but that doesn't make me right. No, instead, let's just talk about the ideas and how they relate to us as people. What kind of a strategy is that? I mean, maybe I'm just not seeing it because my strategy would be to go and clearly state what the state of the evidence is. But no, I guess we're going for a different tact. Let's give Bret a little bit more time to explain himself.
As much as I agree, explaining the universe and explaining biology is difficult, it does not solve a problem to imagine that a creator is the answer. And even if there was one, well, maybe that creator was existing in a universe that was created by another creator, but eventually you're going to get to a place where you're going to have to reach for the only explanation we have ever come up with for where radical increases in complexity come from. So even if we, in this universe, are the product of a creator's work, ultimately that creator is going to have come from somewhere, and the only explanation that could possibly work is going to be Darwinian.
Did Bret just say that God evolved in a Darwinian sense? That's his argument? He could have opened up this argument any way he wanted. Tucker did not even tee him up with a question. And he decides to start by discussing the principle of parsimony and saying that even if Tucker and the creationists are right and God just magically created all of the species and humans as they are today, then the principle of parsimony would demand that God evolved in a Darwinian sense. That's the argument that he's been waiting a year to talk with Tucker Carlson, and that's how he wants to open the discussion. Really? I mean, I don't know what this man's goal is other than maybe to just play both sides and try to expand his audience and grow his revenue streams by getting some of Tucker Carlson's fans on his side. I really don't know, because no one in their right mind would try to actually convince anyone that evolution is true using an argument like this. I mean, he hasn't even discussed why the evidence is such that a parsimonious explanation would demand Darwinian evolution. He hasn't touched the evidence. He even went so bold to say that the facts and the evidence don't make him right. But somehow the principle of parsimony, despite not mentioning any of the facts involved, he thinks is a good argument to open with against Tucker. I mean, clearly everyone knows that the creationist response is just that God was not created. So why would he ever think that this is a good argument? I can't. I don't know what is going through this man's brain other than just trying to grift.
I'm not saying that I know whether there is or there isn't, but I am saying that the principle that has allowed us to see all of what we can see, that has allowed us to build all that we have built, that principle is parsimony, and it suggests that this universe is not the product of an intentional creation.
So the Hebrews explained it this way, and the Christians too, that the process is inherent in the description. So the creator is the force that creates and is not himself created. So in other words, God was not created. God has always been there, period.
Right. And I see, you can make the question go away, but I don't know what that means. We don't have any example of such a thing. So
no, we definitely don't, because everything apart from God is created.
Well, okay, let me take a different tack.
Yes.
This man continues to floor me. I mean, he's already just going to abandon his opening argument and just say, well, hold on. Tucker, you just gave the most predictable pushback that literally a small child could have seen coming from any given creationist to the argument that, well, God would have evolved in a Darwinian sense. Literally everyone who believes in God believes that he was not created. This is very, very common knowledge. And just all Tucker had to bring up was that very commonly known fact among creationists, and Bret is just willing to completely abandon his argument and just switch to a different argument entirely. He had a year to prepare for this. He taught evolutionary biology. He should know the evidence. He should know the facts. He even said he could go through them all with Tucker, but he wants to try a different strategy. This is the strategy that Bret thought was better than all the facts and the evidence. There's just no way that he could have come to this honestly trying to defend evolution against these creationist lies. I mean, Tucker said there is zero evidence supporting evolution. You'd think that you would start by showing at least some evidence, Bret. At least some. Okay? But no. Let's see what this different argument is going to be now that he's abandoned the completely nonsense opening argument that he had in the first place.
Let's just start from the premise that there is a creator who intended this universe and the biota. So I'm a product of that,
right,
in this thought experiment. And in such a case, I know that this creator gave me a capacity to reason. I'm pretty good at it, and so I've invested in it professionally. And he gave me an incredible set of evidence for Darwinian evolution. And I'm now forced to grapple with the question of why a creator would have given me a capacity to reason, would have given me the principle of parsimony, the power of which I can see, and a set of evidence that forces me to conclude that the biota at least evolved in a Darwinian way.
So Bret's second argument relies on both parties agreeing to the fact that the evidence is undeniable. I mean, the argument literally is, well, why would God have created us with rational brains, the principle of parsimony, and evidence that is undeniable to any rational agent that would make you conclude that Darwinian evolution happened and universal common ancestry is shared? You kind of skip past the actual presentation of all of that evidence, Bret. That's kind of the central point of these debates, right? Is that the creationists flat out deny the evidence. Tucker Carlson very explicitly denied all of the evidence upon which your entire argument is resting. Because if the other person that you're talking to does not recognize any of the evidence, then you can't use this argument. And we all already know Tucker Carlson says clearly that he thinks that there's zero evidence supporting universal common ancestry. So why would you in a million years think that an argument that says, well, why would God make us rational and provide us literally indisputable evidence for evolution, and square that circle, make that one make sense? Yeah, well, that argument would clearly work on anyone that already accepts the irrefutable state of the evidence for evolution. But considering the fact that you literally chose to present exactly none of that evidence and just assumed that you're all on the same page with both Tucker and his audience, I mean, it's mind-blowing. I don't know why he thought that this would work. I don't think any... Okay, here you go. Why would anyone with a rational mind think that this argument style would work on somebody like Tucker Carlson or his creationist audience? No rational person would think that, which then makes you then wonder why Bret is presenting this as an argument. What are his aims in this? Because it's clearly not to present the evidence in favor of evolution or to even defend evolution. He's just assuming that you already agree that the evidence is irrefutable and then asking you, well, why don't you accept it? Clearly, they don't think it's irrefutable, Bret. I mean, how do you need me to explain this to you?
I think the right way to understand all of the evidence is that religious belief systems are themselves profoundly important products of evolution. They are keys to the amazing capacity of humans. And so I don't know how clear this is, but part of what I'm saying is that I think the facts tell us, or they strongly imply a story in which there is no literal creator, but they do not tell us that the creator is a fiction, right? Any more than a wing is a fiction.
I'm sorry, what? Did Bret just completely miss the memo that he's talking with Tucker Carlson here, who clearly stated in front of millions of people that there's zero evidence for evolution and that scientists don't even accept evolution anymore? That Tucker Carlson? And it seems like he just came on here. He's clearly not interested in discussing any of the evidence for evolution. He's not interested in correcting Tucker Carlson at all about his misunderstanding and misinformation about that evidence. It seems like Bret is more interested in a discussion on religion being adaptive and that humans evolved to have a religion which he thinks somehow makes it not a fiction. I don't know if he doesn't know what fiction means, but that would not negate it from being fictional just because there's some sort of proposed evolutionary adaptation, like adaptive advantage for groups of humans believing in fictional beings. I don't see how that falls at all, but namely, it just doesn't seem like this is the time or the place to have that argument with Tucker Carlson, who doesn't even believe in evolution to start with. Like, this is the type of discussion that you might have with other evolutionary biologists before you left the field and started right-wing grifting on social media, Bret. Like, you know, back in your actual academic days in evolutionary biology, this could have been a discussion that you could have had with your peers. But not with Tucker Carlson. Not with a guy who just flatly lies and says that there is no evidence that anything even evolves or shares universal common ancestry in the first place. This is not... I mean, where do you think that you are? What kind of audience do you think is listening to this right now? Tucker is selling this as him debating an evolutionary biologist about evolution. That's how this is being sold to his argument, to his audience. And instead of showing that audience what the evidence is that they are all definitely ignorant of. I don't think that Tucker Carlson or his audience actually understands any of the evidence that Bret has already claimed is irrefutable if you are rationally looking at it. Instead of actually showing what any of that irrefutable evidence is, he just wants to make a point about how, oh, well, God isn't fictional because we were evolved to believe in gods. I don't understand at all what he thinks that he is doing in this conversation. But does anyone want to take a guess about what kind of counter argument that Tucker is going to present? It's going to be really nuanced and evidence based. Don't you worry about that.
I don't think it is adaptive. I don't think there's any evidence of that at all.
And there it is. See, Tucker actually at least understands the assignment, where you are debating about what the evidence suggests. So even if Tucker lies and just says that there's no evidence for evolution, if the other guy isn't willing to actually present the evidence, then Tucker's just going to win, because he's just going to keep saying, well, there's no evidence for anything that you're saying. Well, there's no evidence. Zero evidence. And then, obviously, to his audience, that's a win, because the other guy is clearly tacitly agreeing with the fact that there's no evidence. If he continues to fail to present any of the evidence, it just comes across like Tucker is being truthful and the other guy is just BSing with a bunch of word salad instead of actually showing the evidence. And what's the average Tucker Carlson viewer supposed to think? Like, they're expecting the guy to come up with evidence, if there is any, and if the guy doesn't present any evidence, then they'll just conclude that Tucker is right, and there isn't any evidence.
And I should also say that, by the way, and I'll tell you why I think that, but I should say what I said on Rogan was like characteristically inarticulate and imprecise. And I don't have a problem at all with the idea that there's physical evolution, because I think there clearly is. My problem is with the question of the creation of all things. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's a better explanation or a more reasonable explanation that there's just a God that created everything.
Okay, so it seems like even Tucker is trying to help out Bret and his terrible, terrible arguments here, because it seems like he had this statement pre-planned in advance of this because he thought that an evolutionary biologist might call him out for the abject lying that he did on Joe Rogan's podcast about saying that there's zero evidence for evolution and nobody believes in it anymore. Yeah, I mean, you'd think that any sane evolutionary biologist would, correctly call you out on being wrong about that. But since Bret Weinstein didn't even bother to do that much, Tucker just inserts this little snippet here about how, I'm so characteristically inarticulate and imprecise with my words that I didn't say what I really meant, which is that, I have absolutely no issue with evolution. It's just the origins of things. And it's like, dude, everyone knows that's BS. Like, there's no way that you could just be inarticulate enough to say clearly and emphatically over and over and over again on Joe Rogan that there is zero evidence. He kept repeating, there's no evidence. There's no transitional fossil record. He kept repeating this. That's not just being inarticulate or imprecise. That's being wrong and lying. And now he's lying about that lying that he did and saying, I didn't say the right thing because I'm just so imprecise. I mean, he expects us to believe this, but apparently Bret does believe it, because Bret doesn't challenge him at all about any of this or anything that he said on Joe Rogan's podcast in the slightest. Tucker could have just not backtracked on anything that he said right there, and it wouldn't have changed this conversation at all, because Bret's not trying to call Tucker out on anything that he's lied about in the past. It seems just like he's viewing this as a vehicle to discuss the ideas that he thinks are cool and neat, like, hey, maybe belief in God is evolutionary adaptive, and that's why people believe in God. It's like, okay, cool, but you're kind of at the wrong podcast to be making that argument. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing what Bret thinks that he's doing here, but at least we could get some sort of a walk back and omission on Tucker's part that evolution is real and does happen. And I mean, I would have liked for Bret to then ask a follow-up question about, wait, are you saying that you now accept universal common ancestry? Or could you clarify what you just said about evolution clearly is true and happens? I'm interested in that stuff. But no, Bret's not going to say any of that. And they're just going to go right back to the topic of whether or not religion is evolutionarily adaptive or not.
if you disagree, I'd love to hear it. But let me just say of the question of religion being adaptive. So like one of the main modes of religious expression from the beginning of recorded history is human sacrifice, including, and it still goes on today around the world in various forms. And the idea that that's like necessary because population outstrips resources is not always true. Like there are tons of examples, including in modern day, lots of places, including the United States, where there's plenty of resources and people do it anyway. But it's the same story in every civilization, none of which could have had contact with each other that we know of. And there's kind of nothing that evolutionary biology can say about that. It's like it's not helping people at all, and they're doing it anyway.
Well, I look at it differently. I mean, I see the same or a similar pattern. And my sense is in biology, when we see a complex, costly pattern that either re-evolves, spreads, or otherwise persists over a long period of time, we are forced to grapple with the question of what could its utility be.
Exactly.
And while I don't think we have a good hypothesis about the utility of human sacrifice, and personally, morally, I'm offended by it, as I'm sure
me too.
You are.
So is God, by the way.
Nonetheless, like so many of humanity's worst attributes, we have to look at it and grapple with the evolutionary implications, that it does have some sort of a meaning. And I should say, buried within what I'm saying is a critique of where my field has gotten to.
This is so painful. I just had to let that snippet play out because you cannot believe how bad of a job Bret is doing here unless you see it unclipped. I mean, he's literally just, well, Tucker, all that stuff that you just said that isn't true at all, I see it a little bit differently. I don't know how to answer any of the things that you just said in a coherent and convincing way, but if we just assume that I'm right, like the proper way to respond to this would be to address the faulty misunderstandings that Tucker Carlson seems to have about the evolution of populations, right? Like, it's not necessarily the case that human sacrifice is advantageous to the people being sacrificed, but at least Bret's idea, and I'm not even saying if this is true or not, but what his hypothesis clearly is that religion has a social cohesive factor for a population that makes the entire population stronger because they're more socially cohered and can work together under a shared belief system. And even if that belief system involves human sacrifice, that it still is an advantage to cohere the entire population under one religion. That could have been a way to address what Tucker Carlson clearly doesn't understand about evolution, because he suggested that the evolutionary explanation for human sacrifice would be that the population is outgrowing its resources, which would not be the explanation, right? You need to address the faulty premises that Tucker is laying out that are inherent in his question. Like, he's saying that every single religion, he said it in his characteristically imprecise way, he said every single religion has human sacrifice except for Christianity or whatever. But that is also just not true. I mean, it's just like, yes, you can find human sacrifice in numerous different religions, but not all of them. There are numerous examples from like Aboriginal tribes to the Inuit to several Native American groups like that do not have human sacrifice. It's not completely ubiquitous among human religions. But okay, we just have to accept Tucker Carlson's framing and respond, well, Tucker, I see it a little bit differently. Like, I just wanted to gag. I mean, and then to go on and say, I mean, his response is basically, yeah, it really is a head scratcher, and nobody has any hypotheses about why this could be, but we know that it has to have some advantage because we just have to assume that what I'm saying is correct. And if we just assume our conclusion from the start, we have to wonder, what is the advantage, Tucker? Even though Tucker literally just said to you that everything you said is wrong and there's no evidence for anything you're saying. It's like Bret's entire approach to this is to always try to agree with Tucker. Always try to find a middle ground. Always try to find a way to rephrase whatever Tucker just said in more scientific language so that you can say, see, we really all agree together. And that is just the worst debate tactic because it allows Tucker to continuously get away with lying and false premises and misinformation and for him to go completely unchallenged. Entirely unchallenged because Bret just comes across as agreeing with Tucker. And oh god. And then he wanted to then transition to saying, well, I think what I'm really saying, buried in all of this word salad, is that I actually want to criticize the field of evolutionary biology. What are you doing, dude? Are you just like a crypto creationist? I mean, he started out this whole thing saying that he's an atheist, but then at every single opportunity for him to, present the evidence for evolution, he failed to do that. For him to push back against the misinformation that Tucker is spreading, he failed to do that. And now he's just going to use Tucker's platform to criticize the actual science that's being done in the field. I mean, what are this guy's goals? It really just can only be a selfish grift of trying to get more eyeballs on his content. That's the only explanation for this train wreck of a debate.
I think my field is stuck.
Yeah.
And it's no longer solving big problems. It's focused on producing lots of papers that study some specific, but it's not discovering big new things. And that's not because there isn't lots to be done. It's because it's sort of lost track of how to do it. So I'm not arguing, I'm not a champion of the state of evolutionary biology. I think it's a little it's pitiful. But I am a champion of the basic Darwinian paradigm, which I think we have lost sight of.
So after all of that, Bret expects us to believe that he's a champion of the Darwinian paradigm. Buddy, you couldn't even correct Tucker on any of the lies that he told about that paradigm. You couldn't even provide one shred of evidence in front of the entire audience. You couldn't even try to convince anybody that this is correct. I mean, what kind of champion are you? I mean, all of his arguments so far relied on the audience already accepting Darwinian evolution as a fact for literally any of the arguments that he has presented so far. So he's a really shitty champion, to be honest. What he really means by this is that he thinks that the current field is too tied down to biochemistry and genetics, and Bret advocates that culture also evolves and is a product of Darwinian evolution, which is, rather more fringe in the field, and so that's the major beef that he's on here to talk about. And they spend the next, hour or 2 hours talking about how they think that, everything going on in the Middle East right now is all biological and based on evolution and all the terrorism and all the wars in the world. And it gets really, really into the fringe evo psych territory that is just not at all the consensus. And ultimately, it does absolutely nothing to push the needle for either Tucker or his audience that evolution happened. Like, I know that Tucker gave lip service to, we accept evolution, but no. He doesn't. He does not accept evolution. He stated very clearly that he thinks that God created humans in their current form. And then also double speaks and says that he has no problem with biological evolution. Buddy, you need to clarify. Like, Bret, you need to ask some clarifying questions. Because what Tucker seems to think of as evolution is just, oh yeah, people adapt to new circumstances. That's literally all that Tucker seems to think that he's talking about here, and they're talking past each other. And Bret thinks that he's accepting universal common ancestry or something, and that now it's time to talk about how evolutionary biology is shutting down Bret's ideas about cultural evolution and all this crap. It's like, you have not done any of the groundwork to have that conversation with Tucker yet. And it is so clear that he hasn't. When Tucker responds to his argument about, well, here is why Bret thinks that it would be evolutionarily advantageous for God belief to evolve because it would create more stable cultures. And in response to this argument, just let's hear what Tucker says.
If you have everybody calculating that it's morally, you should do the morally right thing if you are in a position to be observed, and if you're not in a position to be observed, then you should do whatever is most profitable, right? Civilization breaks down. If, on the other hand, you take a narrative and you say, nobody ever gets away with anything, it's being observed, it's being recorded, and it may be profitable in the short run, but there's an awful lot of punishment that will come later, right? Frankly, I don't even know if the sentence I just said is a religious narrative or a translation of game theory. It's the same thing.
Right, and I would say that everything you're saying, which is complex, quite, is an argument for a creator, because the design is so brilliant as you're describing it. And the end result, of course, is like the perpetuation of the species, of all species, that like, that's an accident? Like, because you're describing a system with intent. And that intent comes from where? You're describing a system with a goal.
I am describing a system with a goal, not with intent. Yeah, the system has a goal. And
the goal is the intent, right? The intent is to achieve the goal.
Well, that is the sticking point.
This doesn't make any sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense.
It doesn't make any sense without it. Well, I don't want to use the phrase intelligent design, but like,
well, let's take a parallel example, and
okay,
we could trip over the parallel example if
I just think you've made an amazing case for God, and I didn't know if you thought of yourself as an evangelist. But
no,
you just convinced me.
I've made a very compelling case for a belief in God.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how you play yourself on Tucker Carlson. I mean, that has to have been optically the worst performance in a debate I've ever seen. I mean, literally, Bret's desire to find some ground of agreement on literally every single point that Tucker puts out is just setting himself up to be made a fool of like this. Like, Tucker is laughing in his face and saying, oh, you just made an argument for intelligent design. And then Bret is saying, well, actually, I made an argument for believing in God. It's like, you're supposed to be on here arguing that evolution is true. That's what Tucker brought you on. That's what set up this entire thing, was Tucker literally just lying about the state of the evidence on Joe Rogan. And you wanted to come up there and make the argument that he got it wrong and that the evidence clearly favors evolution. And now we have devolved to the point where he's trying to make an argument that we should believe in God because it's evolutionarily advantageous. And then Tucker is saying, that's the best argument for intelligent design I've ever seen. In his just stupid laugh. And then saying like he's claimed victory and that Bret just convinced him of God. And which side do you think Tucker's audience is going to come away with thinking, oh, well, that was the side that had the more reasonable argument? Like, his argument, like, the audience is clearly going to come away with this thinking, wow, I'm glad that evolutionary biologist told me that I'm already thinking all the correct things. And it's like he hasn't pushed the needle at all. I don't think that he has made himself look good. I don't think that he has increased his subscriber count at all. I mean, he looks like a fool up there. He looks like he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's just agreeing with anything that he can possibly latch on to agree with Tucker Carlson about for some reason. And I mean, I can't believe that Tucker Carlson was able to actually own anyone in a debate. I mean, It shocked me. It really shocked me. I mean, an elementary student with just an elementary understanding of the evidence of evolution could have dog walked Tucker Carlson if they were actually going to argue about what the evidence is and what that evidence indicates. But Bret had a completely different agenda that completely backfired in his face here. I think that he came off looking completely foolish. He took the L, somehow got completely just dog walked by Tucker Carlson. I can't even believe it. I mean, this debate really needs to be studied by future generations of what not to do. Like, as a scientist, this is a prime example of how you do not do science communication. Because all of the creationists listening to this conversation come out of it thinking, wow, that was some great evidence for intelligent design. Tucker Carlson clearly told me so, and that Bret guy didn't have any rebuttal to it. It's like, I mean, I really cannot think of a single debate in the entire history of debates about evolution that has been this terrible, this much of a train wreck. Can you? I would really like to know. If you can think of a worse one than that, I will subject myself to it and see if it is possibly worse than this. But I really think that Bret Weinstein just needs to retire at this point. I mean, he already has. He already has retired from the field of evolutionary biology. So, like, thank goodness for that. But he just won't go away. So I guess what I'm really asking is just, Bret, please just go away. I mean, nobody on either side wants you on this, except for the creationists like Tucker Carlson who want you as a punching bag to make themselves look good in front of their audiences and tear down science. Because so far, Bret was happy to agree with every point that Tucker could come up with. He said, oh, well, if I could just rephrase the religious framework in terms of game theory, then really we're saying the same thing, Tucker. But then he will take every single opportunity to criticize the actual science being done in the field of evolutionary biology. I mean, clearly this is not anyone that should be a champion of Darwinian evolution as he claims, because he's only actively spreading misinformation, inflating the ego of lying creationists, and then like spreading public mistrust of the actual field of scientists doing the real work. It's just an absolutely abysmal display on every single front. But of course, I am of the belief that if Bret had actually been interested in defending the evolutionary consensus and explaining what the state of the evidence is and what makes that evidence irrefutable to anyone with a thinking rational mind, which he argued, if he was actually willing with engaging in that debate, Tucker probably would just never have spoken with him or let him on. So, I mean, the only reason why Tucker agreed to have this conversation in the first place is probably because he thought it would make him look good and would make the field of evolutionary biology look bad. Which, congratulations, because that's what Bret Weinstein did in front of millions of people. I mean, for the fact that this is the most viewed debate on evolution in years is just a truly sad state of affairs. But if you're the kind of person that actually wants to see a competent evolution debate where someone just accurately explains the evidence for evolution and shuts down all of the terrible illogical creationist arguments, then hey, check out the rest of this channel and subscribe for more, because I plan on having plenty more of these debates in the future. Thanks.